Top Game with your host, Sammy Castro. Episode 8, Master Sergeant John Scoggins, 2600 OccFld Specialist, aka the Man on Fire, a key influence to the development of this program. At the request of the guest, please visit the Headquarters Marine Corps I Department CAC-enabled SharePoint. In there you'll find a loot box of resources to get you game tight. Everything from career mentoring, enlisted educational programs, and the infamous Galaxy. If you don't know what the Galaxy is, you better ask somebody. If you do know, tell 2 of your friends. Disclaimer. The views expressed on Top Game are those of the producers and or the guests appearing on the program and do not reflect the views of the United States Marine Corps or the Department of Defense. Thanks for tuning in. Comes in the green bottle, but the coolest thing about it is they actually sell it in the Family Marts, which is kind of like their version of a Stop and Go or a 7-Eleven.
Really?
Yeah. So for the small bottle that I brought over from Okinawa, it's like $10.
This stuff is good.
Yeah. And it's not their top of the line stuff, and the Japanese have gotten to the point where like no age statement whiskey is the norm.
Okay.
So they figured out a way to release good whiskey, and they don't even need to tell you how old it is.
I could never drink whiskey or anything without mixing it. Before Scott Strakowski, another really good friend of mine, he got me a 18-year-old Macallan for my daughter's birth, and I tasted that. Upset the wife to no end, because at that point, if I didn't drink $100 scotch, I wasn't drinking it, So I'm going out buying all these bottles of scotch and whiskey and, draining our bank account. The wife is just going crazy. She's like, damn, Scott, for introducing you to that delicious stuff. So now I've gotten better. I've realized that, I can get a $20 bottle of Buffalo Trace and I'm good.
Buffalo Trace, yeah. I think I've had that once at an airport bar. But I started drinking whiskey when I met Elizabeth. Mm-hmm. I mean, I'll take that back. The way you really class things up at a quinceañera in Texas is with a bottle of Crown Royal. So you can tell who the ballers are because they got the velvet purple bag, right? But when I really started drinking whiskey was with Elizabeth. She had introduced me to it, and that's how I knew I had a classy lady.
Yeah.
And this one spot I used to take her to that was outside my normal stomping grounds in our hometown was called Club 21, and they had a really healthy, especially for Galveston, selection of scotch. And so, I obviously started with the normal blends like the Johnny Walkers and the Chivas, and then I started getting into the single malts and whatnot. But it wasn't until several years later that I actually started exploring some of the other lesser known labels and brands, and I drink a fair amount of whiskey. I preferred whiskey over rum when I was in the Dominican Republic, and I quickly understood that the better the whiskey, the less severe the hangover, right?
Yes.
Or there might not be any hangover whatsoever. And then I started learning to pound water with the whiskey. And a lot of the men in my family mostly drink beer, but for me, the whiskey's the way to go.
I've been switching between. I get a rum probably about every 6 months or so, and it's Dominican rum. I can't remember the name of it, but I just grab the same one. I wouldn't.
Brugal.
I don't know.
Those are the two main ones. Barceló and Brugal.
It's delicious, but
Barceló was the whiskey that I would drink, and I will tell you that some of the rum that I would drink. When we actually used to go down, Liz would organize tours for the distillery there. So you get to see how they make the barrels, and
Nice.
when you walk into the area where they age it, it's like this big concrete warehouse, and you walk in, like the temperature immediately drops like 10 degrees. But it's an open facility, and you can just smell the wood and the caña and all of that. So yeah, and then when you get towards the end, they give you a tasting, and then they'll pair it with different types of chocolate.
Mm-hmm.
Cacao is really is a very prominent export for the Dominican Republic, and so is rum. And they pair the two of them together. So taste this rum with this chocolate, and then try this rum with this chocolate. So that's how I got a better appreciation for it out there. But I still prefer whiskey. But so let's get started.
Okay.
Yeah. So here we have finalmente, John Scoggins, OccFld Specialist Extraordinaire. Swan dive, right? Because I mean, you introduced yourself today to the group as retiree select.
Oh yes. So that became a joke in the house.
Yeah, how does that feel?
Or in the office.
We'll pull you closer if you don't want to be bumping your head on that. I can edit this out.
So, you know the story because you were in the vehicle.
Right.
I was having a real hard time on that trip.
So just for clarification,
Yeah.
what percentage were you at when we jumped in the car, slammed the doors, and we started heading towards San Antonio?
Oh, I was not even close. I was all in on competing for Master Guns and then taking whatever orders I got.
So you were at 0%.
I was at 0%. So I had been wishy-washy, right? I had thought about retirement.
Okay.
Considered it, talked it over with the wife, and we had both like, no, that's not the thing. So I had just decided against it. So I wasn't. Yeah, at that point in time, I was all in on staying in the Marine Corps. And
did you have a perception of like how much longer you were going to stay in the Marine Corps?
I don't know if I've ever thought about that. As
30.
As it really was going to depend on the family because we have to realize. I grew up in a military family, and that had its issues. And one thing I always told myself, because of my dad always being gone and things like that, is that if I ever had a family, I would get out immediately. I would get out, and I would focus on my family. So when the wife and I got married, and I was in Quantico, and then I got orders at the Pentagon, it was like, all right, well, we're still all together, not deploying, whatever, and I'm not even eligible for retirement. It's not a big deal.
Right.
So then, but things had changed. It was like, wow, I might actually have a chance of becoming a Master Guns. That'd be awesome. So, I didn't know how long I was going to stay in. I knew that I had concerns about me picking up and having to move and being away from the family simply because I had always told myself my whole life that as soon as I had a family, I would get out of the Marine Corps. So I was already conflicted, knowing that if I got selected that I would have to move. And, telling Marines, hey, we had this issue with Abuan, that he got promoted. He got promoted out of his billet. And it was hard on him. I mean, him and his wife had just moved to Quantico. He was at SysCom. He was gunny. He was doing phenomenal work. SysCom was very happy with him. His wife was doing phenomenal from what I understood. Like she was working I believe, Marine for Life. And she was having impact at the Commandant Sergeant Major of the Marine Corps level. So she was doing really, really well. And then he got selected.
It's an amazing scenario when you see the husband and wife both, like, all in.
And they had just gotten there. So it's not even a case of they had been in that area for an extended period of time and he wanted to stay there. They'd been there a year, and but he got selected for Master Sergeant and there was no Master Sergeant billet there. And it was one of those like, hey brother, like we got to send you to McKiss. That's where the billet is. That's where You know, you got promoted, you got to go. So that's in my head, right? We just told this Marine that. And now if I get selected to Master Guns, I mean, I gotta do what the Marine Corps tells me. You know, I can't. Yeah, you can't.
You got to practice what you preach.
Exactly. You know, so Willie had always joked with me. You know, you were gonna go. I was gonna go to first radio. Like that was what he said to me. And I know a lot of people think that there's this special thing where the monitor and the OccFld Specialist pick their orders, but Willie made it known to me very, very early on that
that's not a thing.
No. Willie told me I was going to go where the OccFld needed me.
So you're saying that the monitor doesn't go where he wants to go?
I will honestly say that, you know, with the relationship I have with Willie right now.
And you don't want to jeopardize it by telling me?
No. I'm going to tell you 100% truth. I honestly believe that Willie is going where the OccFld needs him to go. And the
fact that it is Monterey just happens to be a side hustle.
You know, I know the perception, right?
Right.
But
because that's where Zach went, right?
Yeah,
Zach Reeves.
Yeah,
and
yeah. So. But I would say that after seeing him go through multiple slating periods, this is our third one. That is not an easy job to do the Master Sergeant Master Gunny slate, and you come in the billet thinking, "Oh yeah, I'm going to shape the Marine Corps." But then,
are you listening to Nick Watson?
Yeah, but the equation doesn't work out that way, right? And I do not give Willie a hard time about the slate. You know, I know some people call me every once in a while, but you know, Willie calls it the equation. You know, there's a lot that goes into the equation, so he has to know.
I would call it the algorithm.
The algorithm, yeah. He has to know every bit of that human being, right? Every bit of their life, every bit of the command climate that they're at. What are their skill sets? You know, every bit of it, and then he puts the slate together, and it's
and I can't wait to grab him. But
yeah,
how well does he know that individual, especially if he doesn't know that individual?
So
I mean, because you only get so much from OMPF and
yeah. So I think it's it's on that Marine, if you ask me, to contact the monitor and have that conversation. And you have to be open and honest. And this is where I make fun of Willie, because I think Willie came into the monitor build a little bit naive, thinking that Marines were being 100% honest with him. And I think for me, I'm thinking, everybody's playing a game with the monitor. You call the monitor, and it's a human game at that point.
Oh, yeah.
At least the Marine thinks that. Whether or not the monitor thinks that, the Marine thinks that. Like, well, I'm not going to tell him this, but I'm going to say that. And then maybe this will give me orders where my family wants to go, because it's all about the family. At least Marines that are, doing the right thing in my book, or they're advocating for their family and for themselves. And so I think Willie gets to that point where, the Marine has to call up Willie and give him all that information and make sure that he has the full, like you said, the algorithm, so he can put it all together. Because you're right. I mean, the paperwork is only going to say so much. And you don't want to go off of hearsay, because I've made that mistake a lot in my career. That I've heard, somebody will come up to me and be like, you really don't want to put this person in that billet, or you don't really want to do this because of this person's past. And then, I probably shouldn't put a percentage on it, but it's a very, very high percentage where I take action based off of the hearsay of somebody else, and I've been wrong. And I've come to regret it most of the time.
Okay, so without burning your sources and getting into the details, it plays a lot into something that Sonny had mentioned. Mm-hmm. There's some people who you're just going to take their word as gospel. And you're saying that's bit you in the ass.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So I'd say most of the time it's bit me in the... there are some people that can call me, and I will execute exactly what they say without questioning. But those people are few and far between in my circle.
And they haven't burned you yet?
They don't do it. You don't do it. You'll tell me the facts of the person, but you won't make a judgment call on it. You won't tell me what to do about it. So,
but bear in mind that I am always cognizant of the fact that what I say influences things, and you touch on something that I want to circle back to later, so I'll write it down. But I'm never just talking to John Scoggins.
I believe you are,
but I'm not. I'm telling you now. I know that what I say has secondary and tertiary effects to it. I will shoot straight with you.
Yeah.
But I'm also aware of the implications of shooting straight with you are.
So what do you think are the... I'm just interested now is what... Because I just feel like I'm in the same position as everybody else. So,
but you're not.
So
and I think it's surprising to me to hear that you feel that way, because I will say that the OccFld Specialist billet alongside the monitor are probably two of the most challenging, and it's one of the reasons why I'm so ecstatic about the two that were selected in this slate. Mm-hmm. So, Master Sergeant Nick Watson being the new monitor, and Master Sergeant Terry Cross being the new OccFld Specialist. I think both of them are going to be stretched and raked over the coals.
Oh, man,
no doubt about it. But
yeah.
any and everything that I can do to help them and to encourage the rest of our peer group and the rest of the OccFld to support them in their effort, because they're our advocates. They are our champions, and they're the ones most prominently placed to safeguard the future of our occupational field. And sometimes you're going to have to make decisions that are going to jeopardize our occupational field for the needs of the Marine Corps.
Yeah.
Right? Mm-hmm. And so any interaction with those two key players is going to have repercussions.
So it's funny that you say that, because I would honestly say that I'm not the protector of the OccFeld. And the reason being is because to me it's always a service thing. What does the Marine Corps need?
You're serving the OccFeld though.
So what I take into consideration, and this is the calculus for me. One is I always listen to our peer group. I know a lot of people have the feeling that I kind of go my own way in certain things, but I always take note, even if I disagree. Like today, I disagree with some things, but I listen to it all and I allow it to change me and the direction I'm going with certain things. But at the end of the day, the only thing that matters to me with our OccFeld is that it's healthy. Capability is number one. So will the mission be taken care of? And that's the Marine Corps mission. And the next thing I think of is the health of the OccFeld. And by health, I mean, will Marines be promoted within the enlisted career force controls? So at the rate at which the Marine Corps wants Marines to get promoted. And
not at a George G. Garcia pace.
No. At least but you got meritoriously promoted. So
he earned it, right?
Yeah. So, but that's I want to make sure that everybody has the opportunity for promotion. But if it means reducing our OccFeld, I'm not the one that's going to protect 20 master gunny billets. I'm not that guy. Or any rank, to me it's because I did it. We were up to 22 master gunny billets in the February SR, and I came back and looked at it and I was like, this is bad. Our promotions to master gunny are going to go so fast and now we have to fill the MIG ops chief billet, which is a master gunny who has to garner the respect of multiple battalion ops chiefs underneath him. Not just RADBIN, but Intel Battalion, LE, and all the other. So how do we build that guy? Well, or gal? That's not going to be an 18-year master guns, right? So how do we create that? And we create that by allowing experience and slowing those promotions down. So we reduced down to 16 master guns or 17 master guns, so that we could make it competitive, and we could slow down those promotions.
And competitive it is.
It's going to be. I know a lot of people are going to say, well, we just had the great giveaway, right? Well, one, I would say it wasn't the great giveaway because the competition was pretty pretty severe. And the ones that got selected, I thought were some of the best master sergeants that we've had in a long time. So, but I would say in the future, things are going to slow down quite a bit. But I say all that because, I'm not the protector of the OccFeld because I think of, it's got to be the Marine Corps first. And if I have to give up a certain billets to make another capability sufficient to support Marine Corps mission, I'm going to do it.
Right. So for me, this slate was of the master guns that were selected was unique because now, like those individuals are some of the Marines that I came up with, right? And so like for me to see Vince Quinteros get selected to master guns,
I know how awesome is that?
From way down the list.
Yeah,
I mean, that for me was without trying to sound condescending, I was so proud of him because I know what it took for him to get there, right? Yeah. And I mean, Vince Quinteros was one of the first dudes that I met at DLI, and and I just saw him as because Mexicans from Texas and Mexicans from California are different breeds, right? They're my tribe, but not my tribe, kind of thing. And he's got all these tattoos. He's talking about the next tattoo he's gonna get, and I'm one of those guys. I got no tattoos, right? And a little, at least at that point in time, a little more reserved. Vince was very loud, and just, I mean, but to see him now, right, as a father and as a husband, and for me, and I've known his mother and his extended family, met them over the years in several different points in time and space, but for me it was a great moment to see that. Sarah Clark was another, and I know for a fact that she was really reluctant about her career plans and really wanting to enjoy motherhood, because it's hard for all Marines, but definitely has definitely been a difficult journey for her in particular, and she's made it through that fire, and I remember chatting with her fairly recently, like, because she told me that she was contemplating dropping papers, and I encouraged her not to, because and I'm quoting myself here, that she could be one of the great ones.
Yeah. She should be worried too. Seriously, because you have those Marines that could plug anywhere and be successful, and like we were talking about the slate.
Yeah.
She's one of those Marines that you could plug anywhere, and so the monitor's sitting there thinking like, all right, well, I have to put this person here because of whatever reasons and all that. She should be worried, because she could end up anywhere because she's a non-worry. She's one of those.
Yeah, I need a big Joker Pools kind of player in this billet, here, there, wherever.
Yeah, Loretta's the same way. And she should be worried too.
That was the next one I was.
I told her she was going to get selected.
So for me, Loretta Sonnerbin, who's very quiet, very private. And we've had several conversations. Sonny and I are we're two peas in a pod whenever we're together. But for whatever reason, I never really knew Loretta, because it's hard to get to know Loretta.
Yeah.
She's not very open and forthcoming with anything. Recently, she's said more than a few words to me, which I count myself lucky in that regard. But I've always heard and seen great things out of any interaction with her, and case in point, executed a trip to Hawaii somewhat recently. I was there for about 2 weeks. we had some interaction regarding one of her junior Marines. I wanted to bring him down to Okinawa to conduct some briefings and do some conferences with some of our key players, MSCs and whatnot. And there was a subsequent conversation from the one I had with her that, you know, some changes, some modifications were made to the initial plan.
Yeah.
She fired back, she's like, whoa, what are you talking about? This wasn't what we discussed. It's like, hey, you know what? You're right. It was not what we discussed. I had this other conversation. You know, my apologies, you know, but these things were said, and so this was identified as a plan going forward. If that doesn't work, we can modify and adjust. But Loretta's one of those people that you don't want to be on her bad side.
No, and you're 100% right. Like she's, I mean, yeah, you might not.
Capital P professional.
It's hard to get to know Loretta, but again, like my wife would say, actions speak louder than words, and Loretta's one of those that. I mean, I never had to get to know her because she was a battalion ops chief as a mass sergeant, killing it, right? Second radio battalion. She is running second radio battalion, you know, and killing it. And it's like, I mean, do you really have to worry when you're building out the slate for a Master Gun Select when you're like, well, she's already done it as a mass sergeant for second radio battalion. Easy fit, you know, like you don't have to worry about it.
And I would argue having her at third is probably the best point in the slate to place her.
Yeah.
Because there's so much going on in PACOM.
That's a challenging battalion. Yeah.
Yeah. And you know, I heard the previous G2 at the MEF talk about it repeatedly. The tyranny of distance that we have to overcome between the MEF and now the MiG and the Rapid. But I think she'll be able to navigate through that with no difficulty whatsoever. But let's circle back to Cross.
Okay.
Because you mentioned something to me that made my heart drop.
Oh no.
And that was the fact that you were still on the fence about your replacement being Master Sergeant Derry Cross until you heard this podcast. That put you over the decision point.
So I say that because I don't know Derry, right? That was kind of his interview for me. And I told that to Willie. I was like, wow, how often do you get to interview your replacement? You know, because I don't know Derry, and we talked earlier about, you know, how hearsay has worked out.
But you did interview him.
No.
You had a conversation with him. You mentioned that to me.
We've had a conversation recently, not prior to the slating. I had a conversation with another mass sergeant that we were looking at that I thought was going to be a great fit, but we just couldn't work it out. Everybody was asking me, you know, oh, you got a short list or whatever, but I really hadn't. You know, I told them all. I was like, I don't have any list. You know, Willie and I had talked a couple times, but knowing how the slate goes, I knew not to even worry about it until we saw the selections and Willie started working through all the things before I could even figure out what my options were. So and you got to think I was at the height of the cyber OccFeld OPTs at that point. My mind was so melted, I didn't even want to think about anything else. And so, yeah, I didn't have any idea who it would be. And then, once I finally had the final ASR of where all of our mass arm billets were going to be, I relayed that to Willie. Willie had all the movers. So he came back with, all right, here's what we got. And we started talking about it. And it's funny because I heard Derry's name come up a couple times, came out the 3rd Ray Battalion. And, his name came up a couple times as a SME on some stuff. And then, a couple, like I said, very people that I respect come over and, would just mention him in conversation, and I didn't, again, it wasn't even in the aspect of who's going to be the, my replacement. It was just, hey, this guy, he's really smart and whatnot. So he had already been on my interest list. So when Willie brought him up, I was like, all right, let's look at this. And And I was pretty excited because we need somebody who has an ELINT background for the future, the next step and all this stuff. I have a lot of ideas for the 2631 MOS. So we need somebody who can focus on that and understands it and make sure it doesn't get screwed up. So a lot of the things that are important for the future was what was coming in the equation, and dairy embodies a lot of that. He's been to Denver. There's a lot of stuff going on in Denver that's going to impact our OccFeld during his tenure. The 31 piece, a lot of that. So when he became one of the options, it's funny because I was like, yeah, I can deal with him, Willie. That sounds good. And then I listened to your podcast, and I was like, yeah, we got the right guy. We're good. And then, a couple of people passed that by, and I would tell them, yeah, I'm thinking about dairy. And they're like, okay, yeah, good. And then Willie called me. He was like, hey, so what do you think about dairy? I was like, no, man, I already told you. I'm good with him. He's my go-to dude. And Willie's like, what? I was like, yeah, that's my final answer. And he's like, what? I was like, that's my. I was like, you do what you have to do. You build out the slate, but dairy's my pick. And that's kind of my interaction with Willie is he builds out the slate, and then and he'll run it by me to see if I have any like really huge issues. And normally I'm like, hey man, you do what you gotta do. Like I don't name drop or anything like that. That's not my thing. So we just discussed whether or not people could fill the role. But I was like, yeah, Darius my guy. That's it. But yeah, that podcast kind of really put me over the edge because it was an interview. I got to listen to 3 hours of the guy that was going to replace me. And that was easy. It was an easy pick after that. A lot of it has to do with his temperament. I mean, admittedly, he's everything I'm not. But I would agree that that's important. That's good. I don't necessarily think that I have the temperament required to do some of these work. I think that's kind of worked against me in a lot of situations.
So that leads me to my next question. What are you not?
As far as my temperament? Man, we talked about the check your ego, right? And you were talking about earlier how you write down the name of the person who kind of slights you or whatever. And I was like, I need to register that one because I get very defensive.
Yes. So for just for clarification, one of the things that so my mother's a social worker, and her practice has put her into contact with other social workers that have done a lot of work with veterans undergoing treatment for post-traumatic stress disorder or traumatic brain injuries and whatnot. And some of the TTPs that they adopt for those individuals have been explained to me in excruciating detail, mm-hmm. and I've applied them. And one of them is to come up with kind of like a mantra. And the one that I've chosen is serviam, which is the Latin for I shall serve, which is what Michael told mm-hmm. Lucifer. I shall serve, and that word can kind of almost instantly, because I've practiced it enough, kind of recenter me. Mm-hmm. Good, bad, or indifferent. It works. I don't know the science behind it, but it just works for me. Yeah. And then another method was, in order to let it go, if I perceive that someone slighted me or something slighted me, you can just jot down a note and just
let it go.
Let it go. Leave it there. And you might have to go back and address it later if that's a requirement, or you may not. And you can just let it go.
See, that's what I need.
Yeah.
Because I don't let it go. And you can ask Sam. That's me. So I'll spend time, and Sam laughs because I'm like the machine gun, whereas he's a precision. He's a precision guided missile, right? Like so. I will take notes of everything that everybody's saying, and I don't take opinions. I record facts over time on a topic or something. And this is kind of how I deal with our OccFeld. Not deal with our OccFeld, but how I advocate for our OccFeld. I'll learn everything I can about something I don't know, And then when I get in a room or a meeting or something, and people start going on about something, I can rapid fire every single thing that I've heard and succinctly shut down that person in a matter of minutes, and then move on. And that's a tactic, but I don't like that about me, because what it also has done has created where makes me unapproachable to a certain aspect, because everyone would think like, well, I'm not gonna ping off on Scoggins, like, because he's just gonna attack me. And I'm not talking about my peers. I'm talking about working groups or OPTs when people are pitching new ideas or something like that, and I'll just no, that's not the way. So I just have that. Whereas Sam will very like calculated, even tone. Like, no, this is how we're gonna do this.
Right.
So that's how he describes it. I just rapid fire facts, and they are facts.
So talk to me about that. How difficult is it to be running neck and neck with somebody like Sam Carter?
Oh man, you want to talk about intimidating? And I picked it. Because we have the same RS, right?
Right.
Me, him, and Ann. So holy crap! You want to talk about intimidating? Right? I come in the billet. First of all, think about the people who come before me into that billet. Glasgow, Bergeron. It's like, oh man, I got big shoes to fill. And I'm trying to pick their brains and all this stuff.
So Bergeron was your predecessor.
Well, Glasgow was, and then Bergeron was before him.
Who was before Bergeron?
Crap, I don't know. I mean, I know that Karsta Toscano was at some point, and I know that because I submitted for the internship while she was in that billet. I'm not sure who filled in between that time. It might have just went from her to Bergeron, but I'm not sure. But yeah, big shoes to fill, right? And I'm a boot. For all intents and purposes, like we were talking earlier, I still think of myself as a Lance Corporal. The time has gone by so fast. I still don't think I'm at that level, So, man, being next to Sam, because we didn't have a 51 OccFld Specialist. So I show up, I get to my desk. Glasgow and I was already in Quantico when I got picked for the billet, so I had come up to the Pentagon a couple times. Glasgow had given me some turnover notes and stuff like that. But by the time I had checked in, he was already gone.
Right.
And Dave Murray, who was Jim Mush's predecessor, he was already gone. So I'm sitting there by myself.
Figure it out.
In our community, yeah. And I'm like, all right, what do? I got the notes that I took from Glasgow, and I turn around, there's a whiteboard and says 2651 OccFld Specialist. And I'm like, well, what's that all about? And I guess Dave Murray had written it. And I'm not sure if it was just something that they were like thinking about, whatever. I'm like, that's interesting. So some 51 issues start coming up. And, some slating problems or whatever. And this is me and Willie are brand new seats. We're figuring it out, right? And, I go out to Hawaii for a quick trip and visit 3rd Ray Battalion. And, I get the pitch. Yeah, we need a 51 OccFld Specialist. I'm thinking, no, that's interesting. And they start pitching ideas. And I'm like, okay. And I'm just recording it all in the back of my head. I was like, we might be able to execute that. Then I get back to the office. And I start pitching. Nobody likes it in the office because you never want to increase headquarters, right? I mean, headquarters should not increase. OPFOR needs to increase, not headquarters. So I'm like, man, how do I make this happen? Whatever. So I talked to the language section because they have quite a few Marines over there. A lot of work. So I don't want to make this seem like we were going after them because they didn't have enough work. They have a ton of work because they manage Marine Corps language, not 2600 language, Right. So I start talking to Kretschka and Jordan, and I was like, hey, how can we work this out? We got to get a 51 up here. So we start pitching some ideas, and good on them for being participatory and not just shutting it down. Not saying, hey, we're going to protect language. We're going to say no. They were like, yeah, that is a gap. Let's figure this out. So So he decided to flip Kretschka's billet, now Krater's billet, to be a 2650 win. Well, when you switch a billet like that, it's supposed to take 3 years. When you submit the toker, it's not supposed to activate for 3 years. And it was like, well, we need Sam Carter up here right now. He is the guy. We knew that. And you don't like doing that, like picking out the one person, but he was the guy that would do the work. Forget, people will say agendas, whatever. Forget it. Who would do the work? He would. So it was like, how do we get him up here? So I talked to Willie. Hey, how can we get Sam Carter up here? So we worked it out, and we overstaffed Sam up to the headquarters. And it was very stressful making that happen. But then he got up there, and then once he got checked in, I go, oh, fuck. What did I do to myself? Now I got to not compete with Sam, and Sam's at a whole different level. That guy will blow your mind. I mean, he bombards my email at 05 on a Sunday morning with AI text messages and YouTube videos. And I'm not there. I'm like, hey, bro, I'm kind of hanging out. I'm zoning out, man. So he's at that level. So it is intimidating.
That's what Sonny said, all in all the time.
Yeah, he's intimidating. And I'm not like that. I got to admit, like I'm always impressed by those people. But I'm not all in all the time. When I go home, I'm checked out. Now, there are times I go home and I work my ass off.
I can't work from home.
But
I've got to...
I try not to.
And it's one of the reasons why... I'm not sponsored by Apple.
Yeah.
But that's one of the reasons why I enjoy a MacBook, because when I'm not at work, I'm on a completely different system.
I got a Surface Pro so I can hook up my cat card and get them.
See?
Well, because
I tried to figure it out. I have not figured out how to connect my MacBook to my Outlook web access.
Yeah, I did.
And I'm not even... I can do it from my desktop gaming PC that I built, home theater PC that I built, so I could game with my boys. It's connected to my big screen TV. I can log into to Outlook that way.
I think,
but this,
yeah.
nah, no.
Sam and I checked out from our families for a good 12 months at the height of Force 2025.
Whoa.
I would say probably a good 12 months, and we worked days and weekends, nights, and I mean there was a time when I think it was an OAG or something.
It's fucking deployment.
Yeah, well, and everybody had showed up, and they were like, "Hey, we're all going to spend the night in Quantico. We're going to have a good time." And it was like, I have to get a toker in, and so I'm working until 3 a.m. from home, and they're sending me texts like, Willie's like, "Hey, we're telling Scoggins stories," and I'm like, "Fuck, man, I wish I was there." It's a weekend, and I'm plugging away, but that's what was required, and that's what we do, right? When it's required, you do what you got to do. Willie does it when it's required. He knocks it out, and then what you have to do is to figure out when it's not required, and then get back in the game with your family, and that's the hard part because I'm an all in or all out person, so I can't live in the halfway. I'm not one of those people. I check my email for 15 minutes. No, once I'm in, I'm in. So I try not to, because once I'm in my email, I got to clear all these things out. And
right.
Yeah, it's rough, man. The job is rough.
So let's talk about family.
You're trying to get at that point.
What
You're
point?
trying to take me to the Simmons podcast. No, just.
What?
Go ahead.
There's no traps here. We're just talking, bro.
All right.
Yeah. 5 kids?
Yeah, 5 kids. Yep. So I was I was single all the way to master.
What's the matter?
The family part's hard for me.
Why?
Like I said, like I always told myself the Marine Corps, service or family, right? Because to me, family is service. And I always told myself, growing up out of the Marine Corps, like all in on the Marine Corps, up until the point I get a family. And then that needed to be my priority. And so that's why it's just, yeah, it's rough. It's an interesting topic of how I got to be married, and how that dynamic is. I have a very interesting dynamic that a lot of people don't have. So
interesting how.
And I don't know if you know the significance of our trip to San Antonio. and how that impacted my family. But yeah, I was,
That's why we're here.
I know. I was a single mass sergeant, up until 4 years ago. And
then what?
And then so she and I had met when we were in Hawaii.
Who's she?
Diana. So she's a 2862. She was a Marine, staff sergeant.
Was a Marine?
Yep. So she did the early retirement. She did the Terra. And we were stationed at 1st Rated Battalion together. Never really directly interacted. But when you see the right woman, you're like, yeah, okay. And you're like, it's not the right time. You take note. And she was married, so I don't go that way. I don't mess with married women or nothing like that. And I'm like, no.
Married with children.
Yeah.
4 children.
Yep. So I checked out, but it was in the back of my mind. And she would want the whole story to be said. So while we were in Afghanistan, there was a joke on the watch floor. It was me. I think Tommy was the watch chief at that point. I don't think George had come in for the night yet. But one of the other 2862s had made this little 550 cord engagement ring. And we were playing a joke, like, oh, you should go propose to her. Like a little joke. So it was like a joke thing. I went over 550 cord ring and proposed to her and stuff. And then we all laughed and it was stupid, deployment games, and then walked off. She kept that thing. And, yeah.
You were both single at the time.
Yeah, no, she was married. And we were just playing, watch floor games.
So you proposed to a married woman on deployment with the 550 cord.
I was dared.
You dared. Go
that
balls.
was it. Yeah.
Okay.
So anyway, we were joking around and stuff. And anyway, probably never talked other than logistics. Hey, we need to get this, this to this team or whatever. Or I need to fly to this site or whatever. Nothing beyond that after that.
Right.
So years go by. We come back from that deployment in 2010. And then, so into 2012 or 2013, she was on Facebook and she's got, she's been divorced, I think, for 2 years at this point or so. She got divorced soon after that deployment. But I can't remember. Some banter on Facebook or whatever, and ended up to us like chatting and whatnot, and then her coming up to Quantico from Lejeune, and we went on a date, and she went back to Lejeune, and I think I went to work on Monday, and then after work I drove to the commissary parking lot real quick, and I called Ben Bradford, a good friend of mine, and I was like, hey, how do you buy an engagement ring? And Ben knows me, right? He knows that I'm like, a lot of people that know me as a single Marine know that I was the single Marine. Like I was young, dumb, and full of, so he's like, wait a minute, what are you talking about? I was like, and he knows Diana. And I was like, yeah, I think, Diana's it.
Color, clarity.
Yeah. And so he starts going through it. He actually took it serious. Color. So once he took it serious, I knew that I was on the right track. So then I had talked to a couple of my other friends, Scott and Kevin and Tommy Boyd and all them, and they're just like, what the hell? But they were all supportive.
Scott
Strakowski. So he was an Arabic linguist. Okay. Really, really good close friend of mine. But yeah, I bought the ring and all that, and she went on a deployment. I had met the kids before the deployment, and she had 4 kids. And at that point, I think they ranged from 5 to 13. So wow. The youngest boy was 5. I think the girls were 7 and 8, and the oldest boy was 13, I think, at that point in time. So I got to know them all, and they just opened their arms, like, hey, I don't know you, but hey, you seem cool, man. Like, I'm not gonna judge you. Let's see how this rolls. So they were, they just took me right in. Like there was no nothing, you worry about that, like, hey, there's these 4 kids, but they gonna, am I gonna be the guy they hate, or are they gonna like me, or how's this gonna go? And they were automatically accepting. I'm probably the luckiest stepdad in the world because they were automatically accepting. No requirement on my end. So yeah, and we ended up getting married, and
it's interesting because my parents split up when I was about 14, 15 years old, mm-hmm. and I was old enough to realize that the marriage was on the downward slope much earlier. But when it finally came, and inevitably, my parents started dating again, and my mom was. I remember my mom being somewhat anxious and nervous about introducing me to Bob. Bob's, some goofy gringo, and we met for lunch, and not that he needed my approval, but he wanted it, and that meant a lot to me. And so from your, especially your oldest stepson's perspective, I could see that initial interaction being a very tense situation. But I will state that my younger brother, who was very attached to my mother, Bob's appearance caught him by surprise, and it manifested itself in a point where their relationship has always been somewhat difficult.
You told me about this.
So it's gotten better over the years, but there was a point there where my brother did not want to be around my stepdad. And I know my stepdad was hurt by that fact, and in a way I kind of compensated a little bit and was a little bit more accepting of Bob because of that.
Yeah, because
because I realized that he tried, he made a legitimate, honest effort, and there was nothing that was because he loved my mom so much and because he genuinely cared for my brother and I, that he was going to continue to make the effort and stay the course and take all the face shots that he needed to, and he took some literally.
Yeah.
And yet and still, Bob is stuck around, and he's always been there for my mom.
That's good.
And for that, as a son, that's all you could ever really ask for.
Yep.
My mom's happy. I mean, she definitely runs that house. My mother does, in a way that honestly she never could with my father. And so their relationship is one that I kind of look to it as probably not the model for me and Liz.
Yeah.
But it's definitely it works for them, and me and Bob get along great. Matter of fact, for last time we were home, I bought him a 35-pound kettlebell because he's really big into fitness.
Yeah.
And you'd thought I'd have given him $1 million.
Good for him.
Yeah, but we get along great, and I have to say that he's probably exactly what the boys needed from the perspective of it. My sons needed from the perspective of a third grandfather, right? Between my father-in-law, my dad, who's now deceased, and then Grandpa Bob, right? And he just he just adores those boys and treats them as if they're his own. They are his flesh and blood.
Yep.
All things being considered. But those extended families can be rougher from the perspective of a military family. And I know you said that you really didn't have to deploy, but I mean, there's been some instances where you had to be absentee.
Yeah, I think a little bit. I've been really lucky though. I mean, I consider myself lucky, and we had the youngest, so that filled out the fifth when we were at Quantico, and I didn't take for granted the fact that she wasn't born while I was deployed. I didn't have any deployments in my near future, and there was points on deployments where I've had to call team Marines. one of them specifically after he just got done with a patrol, and it was a really bad patrol, and he gets back, luckily, and I'm calling him up from the OCE saying your baby was just born, which I guess is a bittersweet moment. Like your life is almost taken, and then you find out that your baby's born.
Right.
So then but at the same time you're not there, right? And he's gonna go back out, right?
Of course.
So I was very aware of all that, and I was very aware of how lucky I was that I was able to be home and raise my daughter and raise my 4 stepkids who I hate saying stepkid. I hate it. Because to me they're kids. They're mine. They got their dad. And I would never take that away from him. He's a good dad. But when they're under my roof, they're my kids. The same way that they say that it takes a village, type thing. Blood is very, very important. But I feel like when we got married and we came together, we may not be blood, but I look at them as my kids, no matter what. I treat them that way, which has caused some of friction, but not much, because I think that I don't think they look at me as their dad per se, but they accept me as a parent, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And we've had our friction. Oh man, So, but
there was a point in time where I got arrested and nobody wanted to bail me out but Bob. But only because I could tell him where I had the money stashed to get me out.
Yeah.
This was before the Marine Corps, by the way.
I love those kids, man. That's why when you brought up the family thing, I was like, oh, you're gonna try to take me to the Simmons level, because I definitely get, when I talk about them, it's just something different. That's my family. That's
how it's supposed to be, though.
Yeah.
It makes everything worth it.
Yes. So I've been that guy. I come back from a deployment, and all the Married Marines go home to their families. And I'm that single gunny who goes and picks up a rental car and goes to a hotel and is just sitting there, staring at a wall. And I'm sitting here like, what? Why? I want a family. So that takes its toll on you, and I don't have to do that anymore. I will always have somebody to come home to now, no matter what. They will always care for me, every one of them. And so that.
Would you say it centered you?
Oh man, I grew up so much. I'm a completely different person, and I'd say the Marines that knew me before getting married to now, like a lot of them, they come to me and they're like, "Well, you're so different." I remember Sergeant Scoggins at the schoolhouse. Right. Who's this guy? I've learned a lot. It changes your life. Kids change your life. I didn't believe it.
Yeah.
It's funny. The wife and I decided we were not going to have kids. The week prior, we found out she was pregnant. But it was the right thing, because there's something when that baby's born, it clicks for you and it matures you. It changes your outlook on life. It's just different. Right. And you self-check yourself. There's a lot of stuff that I used to run at the mouth about. Those Facebook memories, man, they drive me nuts. Like, they'll pop up and I'll post. I had post something 5 years ago that was completely idiotic. And I read it now, I'm like, that was single Scoggins. What an idiot. Now you have perspective,
Right.
But.
So, you and I didn't meet until San Antonio.
Mm-hmm.
And you mentioned that the decision that you made on that trip changed everything.
Oh, it did. Well, it did more than that. It's one of the things that I attribute to saving my marriage. Just prior to that trip, the wife and I had gone on a vacation, the family vacation to Minnesota, and it got crazy.
You like y'all jumped in a station wagon and
Yeah, we drive every year,
Waltz.
right? Every year we go to northern Minnesota for a vacation now. You know, that's something I get to do now that I have a family. I get to go on a family vacation. Like, that's awesome. But I screwed up. It got ugly while we were there to the point where the wife made me go home on my own flight. She drove the kids back home. And it was bad, you know, and you don't know what's going to happen. You know, you done screwed up. You know, and... You know, you don't know how the kids, are the kids going to forgive me? Are the kids going to see the good in me or whatever? I didn't know where things were going to go. I remember that I had started that moment after she told me to leave, on the blame game. And I think it's easy to get on the blame game. You know, you start finger pointing. And It didn't take me long. I think it took me about 2 hours. I called Scott Scoggins, who we're talking about. He was my best man at my wedding, one of my best friends. I keep my friends on a shelf. Like, they're all on the same level, so it's not like one's higher. Although Kevin's gonna be kind of jealous because he gets competitive. But
yeah, you almost got married, right?
Yeah, Scoggins Simmons. I'll tell you, Scoggins came first.
Okay. Alphabetical order.
So he was Plan B. So yeah, I called Scott and he was like, dude, you need to fuck yourself. And he told me some things, and he was the friend that I needed because he was also on my side. You know, he's like, hey, yeah, man, you got a lot of good points, but what do you want? What do you want out of this life? And I was like, I want my family, man.
As you should.
Yep. So I got home not knowing what was going on, and I was still really conflicted, and I get back to the house before they do, and then they pull up in the driveway later on that day, and I apologized to the kids because I thought it was important that I take ownership, regardless of what happened, right? If the family fell apart, not the family
What'd you
fell,
do?
but
You don't want to say.
What's that?
What did you do? You don't want to say.
I took it too far, and
Disciplining the kids.
Yeah, I think every dad has that point. Whoever raised a teenage boy,
Yes.
there's a point where
I got a 16-year-old.
Yeah, man. There's that struggle, right?
Right.
Who's the
alpha?
Yeah. So it was one of those moments.
So
between me and the oldest.
So at 16 years old.
And that wasn't all of it. Like there was stuff. He was defending mom. Mom and I got in a fight. He's defending mom.
He steps in.
Yeah. That's what he does, right?
So if it were anybody else, you'd want him to do that.
Absolutely. Oh yeah, man.
And I mean, if we're being frank and earnest here instead of Sam and John, I mean, we fuck up. We make mistakes.
Yep.
And maybe you were out of line. I don't know. I wasn't there.
I was.
And for him to step up like that was probably the right decision for him to make.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
the only thing that I fault him for is don't run your mouth. Just sock the motherfucker, right? Like,
right? But discretion is a better part of valor. Maybe making it kinetic.
He gave me a chance to save myself, I guess.
Well, there you go. And it changes things when you get physical.
Yep.
With your loved ones.
Let me be clear though. I was not getting physical with my wife.
No, but I'm talking about not with your wife, but with your son. When you get physical like that, it changes things.
It does.
And fortunately for me, when I was 16, and running my mouth, and I bulked up to my father, he didn't kill me.
Yeah.
And for that, I'll be forever grateful. But I was horrified.
Yeah.
At what was going to happen next.
I think I was the one, probably for different reasons, but I was definitely horrified for the family. And I think all the kids were horrified too, and that was the worst part. Was the entire family was there for it, How do you repair it? So first off, right, take ownership. Right.
Okay.
And so that was my step one. Contact everybody that affected. Accept responsibility. Don't pull the bullshit, I'm going to change things. Just accept responsibility. You're wrong. I would say a lot of people just came right, hey, no problem, right? There was one person who basically told me to fuck off, and that's fine, right? I deserved that. Right. But the kids, I came right out like, this is what I did wrong, because, we do that with them, right? I mean, I'm no better than them, so when they get in trouble,
you're sorry.
Yeah, sorry. This is specifically where I screwed up.
Give your sister a hug.
Yep, exactly, right? So that was it, right? Tell them exactly. And they sat there and listened. And then I walked down the front porch and, I just sat there. So this is why I say that our trip was one of the things that saved our marriage. Because while I sat on the front step, the youngest daughter at the time, Anna, not the youngest daughter, Olivia's the youngest, but Anna was the youngest stepdaughter. She comes outside and she gives me a hug. And she's like, I don't want you to leave. And I was like, okay. And then she kind of expounded on that, and I don't want to get into that because I don't think we can finish this interview if I do. But that hit, right? That was like, okay, I have to fix this, right? Because I think a lot of men have an easy time walking away, and she came out and was like, no, man, you're not getting off that easy. You're here for us, and we're here for you, And she said that. She's like, everybody makes mistakes. You're allowed to make your mistakes. How old is
this young lady?
So this girl is way beyond her time. She's 12. She was 11 at that point.
Wow.
Yeah. So she tells me, she's like, we all make mistakes. I don't want you to leave. I love you. She basically just tells me to get back in the game. Like, hey,
suck it up.
Yeah, exactly, right?
Here's a straw.
What are you doing out here?
Yeah.
I would say that the oldest didn't give me that easy of a road, right? Which he shouldn't. Again, you shouldn't. So yeah, that was kind of. And then the youngest boy Evan came outside and gave me a hug and all that and whatever. But we got to that awkward silence part, and then the next day I flew out to go to Goodfellow. So that's the mindset I was in when I got to Goodfellow. Like, oh shit, Kevin had known what was going on. So then we went on that trip, and then that's when we started talking about stuff. And you're talking about your dad and, your relationship with Bob and your brother and all that stuff. And then, Kevin was telling me about, all the things he revealed in the last podcast. We had a really deep conversation with that. And Kevin told me what I needed to hear. He basically, hey, stop being that scumbag. Get your head in this. I mean, what do you want? Do you want to be married to this woman? Like, do you want to be in this family?
Right.
So again, having those friends that tell you the hard things and get you back in it. And so when we were on that trip down there, that was I was like, man, I got to retire. And part of it was just, you and me and Kevin talking, and it was like, why am I sticking around? For the Marine Corps. Like, I need to shit or get off the pot with this family. I need to get back to what I originally said. I'm not geobadging. I'm not leaving my family. And if I get promoted, I'm getting orders, and I'm at the geobadge. That's not fucking happening. I'm here for my family. They're number one.
Right.
And that's what happened on that road trip. I made the conscious decision that no matter what happened, I was going all in on my family. And that's what I did. I made the statement, whether or not she keeps me or not, I'm getting out of the Marine Corps. I'm retiring. I'm going to show her that I'm willing to take the actions to save our marriage. And either actions will speak louder than words or they won't. But I'm going to show her. I'm going to take action. So I went home, told her, I was like, I'm retiring. She's like, this better not be about what happened. Like, I'm retired. There's a lot of things, like I got to leave the Marine Corps on a high, got a lot of stuff accomplished,
right.
All that stuff. But that trip, that was the other part of the equation to save my marriage. And it has up until this point. It's been completely different. Me and Conlon, the 18-year-old, have a fantastic relationship, at least from my point of view.
Right.
I can't speak for him. Hopefully he says the same thing, but I love that kid to death. He lifts me up, He makes it a point every day.
Have you told him that?
Yeah, in between our, hey man, take out the trash type shit. But
Right.
I tell them I love them.
That's all in the game.
Yeah,
It's all in the game. But
yeah.
and I find myself having to do this from time to time, just like in those lulls
Mm-hmm.
between in between action.
Yep.
And conflict and the
Yep.
butting of the heads. Grab them and hold them.
Oh yeah.
Kiss them.
I know. I drive him nuts.
And tell them you love them.
I drive him nuts because I'm a hugger.
Yeah.
So he'll run and hug mom, and I'm like, hey man, where's mine at? So he'll come up. All right, John. He goes, yeah. But yeah, I love those kids, man. All for. I could talk for. You don't want to go down that path. I'll talk for days about my kids. They are the most amazing ever.
That's why we do what we do.
Yeah, man. Well, for being, I don't know. Again, I've known them for 4 years, probably.
Right.
And I would do anything for every one of them.
So let's switch it up.
Okay.
Because I can tell you're getting.
Yeah, man, you're gonna.
You're getting a little emotional, but that's all right. That's what this is about. If not for the Marines, where would John Scoggins be?
Oh man, that's a hard one. I'd probably be a bum, because that's where I was headed.
So where are you from?
So I grew up in Florida in the Panhandle. It's called Niceville, Florida. But
Texas was the only state that had a Panhandle.
Yeah, we compete. I was going nowhere fast. I was failing out of high school. I had to go to summer school just to go to boot camp.
Wow.
So it just got kicked out of my house for doing a lot of dumb stuff, and so that if I didn't have the Marine Corps, I don't know where I'd be. I'd be a piece of trash somewhere.
And so what prompted that walk into the recruiter's office?
Well, funny enough is that I was with the MEPS the year prior to a lot of that stuff happening. So I was already in the DEP program, when a lot of that stuff coming. I mean, my grades were already bad. And that was part of the reason why I started talking to the military, is because I knew I didn't have a future in college. I didn't want to go to college, none of that. But yeah, and then I joined the Marine Corps, signed up in the DEP program, and then just a bunch of stuff went south with the family and all sorts of stuff. And then luckily I went to boot camp. I did at least what I had to do, the minimum to get to boot camp, and then that probably took me the rest of the way. Because the Marine Corps gave me purpose, So yeah, I'd probably be a bum somewhere.
So you must have did okay on the ASVAB?
I guess well enough, yeah. I'm probably not as competitive as the rest of the people in our OccFeld. I think maybe I had a waiver or something. I think maybe my drill instructor or my recruiter felt bad for me. Maybe he fudged some paperwork to get me in the OccFeld.
So how'd you pick the 2600 field?
So I think it's like a lot of our stories is that I was signed on to actually be a 2800 of some sort. I wanted to be a electronics tech or something, and then he came up and was like, hey, yeah, if you ship during this time and you could go Intel, what do you feel about Intel? I was like, yeah, Intel sounds badass. And she's like, well, you got to take these tests. He's like, you're not smart enough to take the D-Lab. So, take this other Morse code test. You could pass that one. The other one, you're not ready for that. So he already knew. He's like, you're not going to be a linguist, man. So I went and took the Morse code test. I guess I passed that well enough to become a 2621. And then, I shipped. So that was really how it happened. I was good.
What year was this?
98.
98.
July of 98 is when I went to boot camp. So.
You said you came from a military family. So who amongst your family was in the service?
So my dad is Air Force. He retired after 26 years. He was the E8. My brother was in the Air Force ahead of me, about 4 or 5 years ahead of me. And then, my family's all Air Force except for me. So, I always get that. Like, well, why did you join the Marine Corps? And I always say, well, somebody had to have the balls in the family.
Okay. Before that generation, that was all in the Air Force. Anybody else?
My dad's father was in the Army. So, but, my dad told me I wasn't allowed to join the Army because my grandpa would come back and haunt me if I did. So I was talking to the Army, and then the Marine recruiter pulled me aside and was like, hey, you know, we got this thing called the Crucible. I was like, I'm in. You got an obstacle course? I'm going to boot camp. I want to do this obstacle course. Sam thinks I'm joking about that story, but it's true. As soon as the recruiter pulled me aside, and I was like, yeah, I'm all in, bro. Like, I'm all about the competition.
It is a competitive environment.
Yeah, well, and there's some daddy issues there, right? Like, you know, there was definitely some daddy issues. So it was one of those, like, I have to one-up the old man. You know, I got to show him that, you know, I rate. Because at that point, I didn't rate. I was scum. You know, the stuff that I had been getting into and all that. And, you know, I didn't deserve his respect. So it was, how do I get back into that? So that was that step, you know.
Okay.
You gotta understand something. I'll never tell my dad this, but maybe I will in my retirement. But he is on a pedestal that no other man is on, as far as military leaders. So
He retired as what?
he retired as a senior master sergeant in the Air Force, so he's an E8. But he was that guy, right? Like, I was born on Guam, you know, typhoons and stuff rolling in all the time, and he was that leader that he would go and board up all the windows of all of his airmen. And we're sitting at home alone until he takes care of all of his troops and gets all of his aircraft off the island, and then
he takes care of his
family. He comes over and takes care of his family. And same thing happened when we were in Florida. I remember Mom and I are in the car evacuating from a hurricane, and my dad's still on the coast, taking care of the mission. You know, so. I mean, I think at that time, I probably didn't have a whole lot of respect for my dad as a family man, but he definitely was the epitome of the military man to me. So, but.
So, you think you were working to supersede him?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Did you do that?
No. No, I don't think, no, I don't think so. He's at a whole different level. But I will say that he's the marker, right? I know you ask a lot of the guys on here about mentors. I always looked at the people senior to me as I could do your job better than you. So it was always a competition for me. So I didn't really go to them for mentorship. I always thought, I could beat you at your job. Why are you in charge of me?
Yeah.
Because you're not my dad. Right.
So one of the motivating, I guess, mental constructs that I've incorporated into my perspective has been that all my subordinates think like John Scoggins does.
Yeah. They can get you.
And I'm going to prove them wrong.
Yeah, you have to.
Yeah, and you know, and a lot of it goes back to, and I mentioned it before, Master Sergeant at career course had said that your Marines are always looking to you for a sign of weakness, and that's not the case.
Yeah,
I don't think so. But if you operate as though it were the case, if you conduct yourself as if, you're going to constantly be making movement forward, but it may not be forward in the direction you need it to be.
Yeah.
And so I've had to kind of readjust and reassess that approach. But I think part of that also is some of the I guess, you know, now being a master sergeant, you can let some of that go.
Oh yeah. Well, I'm under the perception.
Sergeant to staff sergeant, you know, you're still close, right?
Mm-hmm.
Staff sergeant to gunny, you're still close, but you know, master sergeant to.
It's a whole different level.
Yeah, it is.
Your grandpa at that time. You know, in Marine Corps years, you know, your grandpa at that time. So you just, you know, you have that ability to just look at that Marine and go like, yeah, are you serious, man?
Yeah.
No, go back there and Go back and do what the sergeant told you.
So no mentors?
So there's been people that I've looked up to a certain extent, but I'm arrogant, man. I'm that guy. I think I don't know. I've never had somebody in charge of me that's better than me, but this is going to sound ridiculous. I think most of the Marines that work for me have been better than me. And that sounds ridiculous, but that's just kind of my mindset, is that I can do you better than you can. You know, I can.
But you think they could do you better than
I think they proved it to me. I and that maybe that's because that's the persona that I put up. But I mean, I've had sergeants, you know, as a gunny, a sergeant come in, slam the door, and be like, "What the fuck, gunny?" And I'm that guy who goes, "That's exactly what I wanted you to do. All right, let's have this out. What's up, man?" And just, you're screwing this up, you're screwing that up. Like, all right, brother, you good on you, man. Like, this is what I want my sergeants to do, you know. So yeah, I think I've had the opportunity to work for a lot of good Marines to do that.
Most people would say that they would never want to be in that position where they'd have to be called out by a subordinate. Like, that would be the ideal or the goal.
I don't think that way. I want them to call me out. One, because I don't think any of us are too good to be held accountable by anybody else.
Not that you wouldn't want them to call you out when you needed it, but maybe you wouldn't want them to have to call you out in the first place.
Yeah, but I don't believe in perfection. So
when you are fucked up, you want to be told.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't, especially in that situation. I mean, we were deployed. In one of the circumstances that we were deployed, and you know, the mission would have, you know, I mean, at the end of the day, I told the sergeant, "Hey, Paxan, brother, like, I know you think you're right, and good on you for having the balls to come in here, but here are all the reasons you're wrong," and laid it out for him. He's like, "Oh, you know, got it," and I sent him on his way. But that the opposite aspect of this, what if I was wrong?
Right.
You know, and he didn't come in there, and the mission suffered. Right. That's
tragic, even more tragic.
Yeah, that's far worse. So I'd much rather have the environment where my Marines working with me can come in, and because they're working with me, can come in and tell me that they think something's jacked up. And I've always been under the mindset that while we're executing mission, you don't ask why, you just do it. But when we have the opportunity, come up and find out, get the why.
Okay.
So that was an opportunity where we had the time. You come in and get the why, and then go on and execute. I don't like the whys all the time because, you know, you just need to get the job done. But when you get the opportunity, you need to know the why. And I think a good leader will give you the why.
So let's test that theory. Why did you agree to sit down here and do this interview?
Oh, man, because I'm better than the rest of the guys you've been interviewing. Are you kidding me? No. It's an ego boost. You know, part of it was because I feel like there's some perceptions about the work I've done the last couple of years. And I
kind of want to set the record straight.
Yeah, kind of. You know, and I just, yeah.
Why not just let the criticism just roll off your back?
I could, but the opportunity existed. So I thought it'd be good to kind of get some of that stuff out. That, you know, like you said, assume. Did you say assume the positive or assume the
assume good intentions? Assume
good intentions. When you're talking to like outside external entities, whether subordinate or senior, we don't do that most of the time. And so I think part of it is I want people to realize that a lot of what has happened within the occupational field over the last couple of years, all the changes, has been under good intentions. You know, not, well, he's just doing his own thing, because that is not the case. Answering the call to occupational.
You've obviously heard that enough that you feel like it's worthy of at least countering. Absolutely.
I've heard it quite a bit, whether it's via other people or just, you know, when we're in meetings and people say it as a slide comment. I'm a man of action. We were talking about this earlier. I just want to find out So at a certain point, everybody can hem and haw and argue. At some point, I'm going to slap the table and move forward. And I think a lot of people take that as me trying to make the decisions for the OccFeld, and that wasn't the case. I listened to everybody, but at some point, we got to get over all this stuff. The OccFeld modernization plan, that's probably one of the main efforts that a lot of people probably thought that he just created what he wanted. But you got to realize I had over 30 COAs built out and PowerPoint slides on my shared drive. I had searched and scoured and interviewed and questioned as many people as I possibly could, and I had a choice. At one point, I could either keep making COAs, or I can limit it to 3 and say, all right, OccFeld, decide. And that's what I ended up doing. I picked the 3 that I thought were the best out of the myriad of COAs that we had, and I said, all right, let's decide. And it was a hybrid COA, right? And the OccFeld had picked, this blah, 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 for the people that participated. And then I took it to the stakeholders. I took it to TCOM, MNRA, and all that. And then they shaped it from there. Well, this isn't going to work because of that. This isn't going to work from that. And then we molded it. And we ended up with what we ended up with. So I think a lot of people think, Force 2025, the same thing. Like, oh, he just made these decisions and moved forward with it. Whether they thought that was the right thing or do or not. It was yeah, I slapped the table at a point, but I took as much input as I possibly could, But I had to move forward, and I think it's my billet's job. All of us, I think we're all in a role where we have to execute, And my role is MOS manual, TNR manual, and TOs. That's my job. That's my lane. So in all 3 of those, guiding documents, I'm going to take everybody's input, and sooner or later, I'm going to slap the table and pitch it to the general and see where it goes. But I think a lot of people took it, if they didn't get their way, or it didn't go the route that they wanted to go. I think a lot of people assumed bad intention, assumed that I was going the route that I wanted to go. And let me assure you, the COA that I had drawn up for our modernization plan was horrible. So if we would have executed that thing, it was really, really bad.
So one of the references for this training management working group that we're currently part of was the mock, as well as the Fragos, or message to the force that was released by the Commandant. And some of the concepts that he points to in there, I don't know if we're executing on the guidance, but I wanted to get your take on it. So coming up in the Marine Corps, we've heard improvise, adapt, overcome. Now it's innovate, adapt, and win. What's the difference, and is there one?
Oh man, see, I think, I'm not good at answering questions like that, because I don't think along those means.
What do you mean?
Well, like I said, I just execute. I mean, I think all those.
So that's the guidance. Innovate.
It is, and I think that's good. And innovate, adapt. Okay.
Another
improvise. I'm just
another point that he makes is and I'm paraphrasing here because I read it in the guidance, but I also heard him say it in the middle of a speech he gave at the Marine Corps Warfighting Labs Innovation Symposium, which was disrupt yourselves or prepare to be disrupted by your adversary. And that seems to me to be extremely difficult for some of the old guard to contemplate, to immerse themselves in, or become comfortable with the idea of disruption. But make no mistake about it, we live in an era of disruptive technology. Look at Blockbuster. You can't.
Yep.
And if you just kind of peel back from just the military, the Marine Corps perspective, you can see instances where processing power has gotten such to the point that we're achieving exponential increases in capabilities across the board. Are we leveraging that appropriately?
Oh, no. I think we white card success in the Marine Corps. It's like watching Heartbreak Ridge, where you know where the ambush is.
Right.
And I think this...
Stitch Jones.
I really think that we've gotten to the point, we've taken zero tolerance way too far. Not only have we applied it to the way that we employ our Marines, but we also we use it to how we lead Marines. It's just gone too far. I believe that you only learn from failure. I love failure. And I think that's what he's talking about, is that we need to get comfortable with failure so we can improve ourselves. And
he's also said we shouldn't have to fail to learn.
Yeah. That's not a personal philosophy of mine. But I think I get what he's saying, is that we should be improving no matter what. Like, why are we stopping ourselves from a lot of this stuff? And you hear it, you pitch an idea and everybody's, no, we can't do that. And all they list is either the current or the past ways of doing things of why we can't do it.
So you know what I call that?
What's that?
Permafrost.
Yeah.
And whenever I see it, I accept it as a challenge to penetrate.
I have an interesting theory on it. I feel like everybody spends their career trying to get things back to where it was when they joined or when they entered a unit. So I have this theory that everybody exiting a unit feels that the unit sucks compared to where it was when they joined. And I feel like a lot of Marines that are departing the Marine Corps feel like the Marine Corps sucks compared to where it was when they joined. So their perfect image of either that unit or the Marine Corps is that of when they entered it and they got their first instantiation of it. Because to them, that's when it was operating at optimal efficiency. And then, so I hear this a lot of times from Marines, or even, the crusty ones is, well, we used to do it this way and we used to do it that way and blah, blah, blah. I'm like, oh, that's fine and good. But,
here's what I would say. Here's what I would say to that. Either their observations or their assessment is based off of limited information, right? So that initial perception of how effective the organization was upon accessions, right, was inaccurate or invalid because they didn't have all the information. And as they went along in their career, they started to see behind the veil, right, behind the curtain, and saw some of the intricacies and complexities that exist in the organization, and it's not perfect.
No,
and I don't think it ever will be. And then the other part of that is, I was always taught to leave the Marine Corps better than what you found it.
Absolutely.
So for those individuals that can, and in their heart of hearts say that the organization is now in a worse off place, they have to own the fact that they didn't counter that.
Yeah. Well, and I don't even know how they could prove that.
Right.
The Marine Corps is leaps and bounds better than it's ever been. And it will continuously be that way. And I have a very optimistic view of that. I mean, you compare the Marine Corps to the generations before it, and I would hope that the generations before us would admit to this, but I firmly believe that we continue to improve. I would not want to fight, the Vietnam era Marine Corps today, right? And I think although the Vietnam era Marine Corps was good, I think we're a lot better today because of all the advancements and the improvements that we've had, whether it's, and I don't mean just equipment, I mean policy-wise, how we how we manage the service. I think we're better off now than we used to be. We have our gaps, we have our issues, but we're improving. But I believe that in most things, society, whatever. We were talking earlier about how I don't like labels, so I'm a defender of the millennials and all generations. I find it like the moans, groans, and complaints about generations, whether it's in the Marine Corps or even just in society, are a cyclical thing. Like, the older generation is always pawning off its, and talking trash about the newer generation, and to me it just becomes annoying.
Define lethal agility.
Lethal agility.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm taking a test.
And then the second part of that is, do you think we possess it?
In the Marine Corps?
In the Marine Corps.
In what kind of war?
Okay, so that's a fair question. I would say in the future operational environment.
I don't know, man. I mean, we're nowhere near where we have to be, but I think we're on the right track. We're asking the right questions. I think the things that the Commandant and the DCI are working on is exactly the direction we need to be going. And I don't think we have all the answers that we need right now, but that's where we have to go in order to fight and win the future battles. So although I don't think we have it now, I'm optimistic in the fact that we're moving in that direction, and I think that all the right questions are being asked. I was lucky enough to be in the room with the DCI earlier this week. And
DCI is the Deputy Commandant for
Information. And the stuff he is saying is like, holy crap. We are thinking on a whole new level now. And there's the old Corps, and people are like, oh no, that's all dumb or whatever.
Right.
But I'm telling you, I mean, there's recent examples of why we need to be moving in that direction. So I don't think we have it all figured out, but I think we're asking the right questions, and we're making everybody uncomfortable, including our OccFlds, right? We're making everybody uncomfortable, and we should be uncomfortable as we approach this stuff and try to figure it out.
So, in a rare twist of circumstances, I found myself spending a lot of time with some of the 06 assistant chiefs of staff out there at the MEF, and one of the guys that I've really taken a shine to, and I think the sentiment is reciprocated, is with the G6.
Mm-hmm.
Colonel Phillips, sharp dude.
Yeah.
And it was one of the other representatives from RMF to the McWills Innovation Symposium. And one of the things that we talked about at length was the fact that this Commandant, General Neller, is very much in line with two other commandants that left a significant impact upon the organization. And the two that he was mentioned in the same breath with were no other than Krulak and Gray.
Mm-hmm.
Do you agree?
Oh, wow. You're asking me to comment on my Commandant while I'm active duty?
Well, I mean,
yeah.
I think to rack and stack Marines,
mm-hmm.
especially of that caliber, I don't. Even if you saw that he wasn't as at the same level as Krulak or Gray, so I don't think that would be a bad thing. I think the fact that we're even having this conversation, he would be okay with that.
Well, you got to think,
and I'll give you this before you even answer.
Okay.
This is from General Neller himself. He says, innovation necessitates making hypotheses about the future operating environment that are then tested for validity, just as the Marines did in the 20s and 30s. We may not find initial successes in all of our experimentation efforts, but our continued focus and persistence will lead to solutions that will enable our future force. This disruptive mindset must be pursued and fostered when found, or it will not sustain itself within our bureaucracy. We need creative leaders who think.
Yeah. I mean, you got to think, he wasn't Commandant for very long when he decided to stand up the Force 2025 working group to blow up the Marine Corps and rebuild it from the ground up. I mean, that was the charter, essentially, was
so
blow it up.
So the 10-pound heads from Silicon Valley would call that a massive transformative purpose. An MTP.
It's pretty phenomenal. I mean, everything was on the table during that.
Nothing was sacred.
No. And so having that come from and it wasn't just the Commandant. I mean, the general officers underneath him were all in line with it. So just having the senior leaders allow that kind of thought to take place, when that really doesn't happen very often. A lot of times the senior leaders are protecting status quo. So to allow all those kinds of people that usually, man, that guy thinks crazy, put him in the corner over there so the rest of us can come up with a real plan. Nah, they pulled those people out of the woodwork purposefully and put them in front and allowed those ideas to permeate. As frustrating as Force 2025 was for me individually,
right?
Because I was the guy with sandpaper at the end of it trying to, smooth out the edges. It had to happen that way. You had to have groups of Marines come in, throw spaghetti against the wall, no constraints, nothing, no restraints, and just come up with ideas. And then force the people that say no all the time to prove that you can't change. And that's kind of what happened. It was, and a lot of people were still uncomfortable with it. Look at the changes to our OccFeld as a result of it. And, you still get, I think a lot of people fell in line like, yeah, we need to make this work. But there's still, a couple of those out there like, man, this is crazy. It's never going to work, blah, blah, blah. Those are the people I write off immediately. I don't say anything to them.
The permafrost.
Yeah. As soon as somebody says that can't happen, I tune them out. Like you are no longer in my conversation. I'm talking to somebody else.
So I don't do that.
Yeah.
What I do is within reason, right? Because there's some people that you're just not going to get through. Is just kind of draw them in with why do you feel that way? What in your experiences have led you to believe that this is an insurmountable obstacle?
Sure.
To even get them to concede possibility, not even probability, just possibility, is a step in the right direction. To just to chip away at that.
Sure.
You're not always going to be successful. You're going to get those obstinate, roadblocks, naysayers, but you've made the effort because I will tell you that if you just let it slide and just completely tune them out, that individual is going to go back to his domain, wherever that is, and continue to be that impediment to progress.
Sure. Well, but like I've already told you, I got that arrogance where I can outmaneuver them. Right. So
but that's the benefit of being in that billet.
I do that with junior Marines, but if it's a senior staff NCO, chief warrant officer, or unrestricted officer, no, you know better.
That's the other thing I would say that when you find yourself at that point, sometimes my last ditch effort would be an appeal to the love of the organization by saying, as you kind of alluded to, we're better than this.
Yeah.
We're better than allowing the bureaucracy to say, no, you can't innovate in this direction, or you can't modify this process.
Sure.
This is the way it is and the way it will always be.
You got to remember, I had everybody telling me I couldn't standardize the radio battalions.
Did you do it?
So I wouldn't say I did it. I would say we did it, right? Because we pulled in a lot of people, but Yeah, it was like, oh no, we don't. That's not how we operate. We task organize. We don't do this. We don't do that. And I'm like, all right, let me show you. And that's why I tune them out, right? Because then I get to work. Like, all right, you just motivated me. Now actions speak louder than words.
Tell me no.
Shut the hell up.
Yeah.
Let me put it in front of your face. So then we did the work, right? We sat there, we whiteboarded, we had a bunch of people in a room, and then we figured out what would flesh out. And then it was like, hey, here's the standardized rate time. And then everybody looked at it and was like, holy crap. But so the reason why I tune them out is because General Henry had given a PME soon after he had become Durant, I believe. And I wasn't able to be there, but it was...
And Durant being the Director of Intelligence for those uninitiated.
But he was talking about the evolution of an idea. And when somebody relayed to me what he had discussed, I was like, man, that's exactly what I went through with the modernization plan. So it starts with everybody hates the idea, right? You'll have some participants, but we're talking about the general population, the group, hate the idea. And then, like, slowly over time,
did he say why?
I wasn't at the PME, but I was just getting the wave types, and I was, applying it to what I had dealt with, and that's exactly what, everybody was like, no, we just, they were defending status quo. And, but then over time, as you work through it, people start coming on board. And then it gets to the point, and this is kind of where it's at right now, is that after you execute, everybody's coming up with, yeah, this is the greatest thing ever, and I was always on board, and so glad we got this accomplished. And I'm sitting here like, you were one of those jackasses making it hard. Like, all right, man, I got it. Like, I haven't forgotten, bro. Like, So, and the same thing with Force Storytelling. No, I let them have their day. Because I want them to be happy for where we're going. I'm excited now that my actions were able to speak. Like, hey, we were doing the right thing. I think if they looked at it and it was the opposite, like, no, this is dumb, then I would be worried. Because I like it. I don't like naysayers. Like, I don't like people to just say, no, this won't happen. But I like it when people disagree with me. So I'll get in the mix with disagreements. I love the argument because I learn. So I would have been concerned if after we execute the modernization, everybody was calling me up going, man, this is all fucked up.
That time in San Angelo?
That was about us having two different careers. We were talking about this earlier. Kevin, has one set of experiences. I have one set of experiences, and we were talking two different languages, I think. And that's just how me and Kevin are. Me and Scott are the same way. I think it's just me. It's probably not even that. I think it is. Because there was a situation, I was company gunny at Company B, MCSB, and Scott was one of the platoon sergeants. And I was like, oh, yeah, we're doing something one way. And Scott comes in. He was a senior gunny to me. And he comes in like, who the fuck do you think you are? And then that spurred it. Me having my personality, I jumped up, he jumped up. We're like freaking going after it, And then not even 2 seconds after, we both calmed down. All right, man, we're good. And then we're going out for a drink. And, I have that relationship with a couple of guys. But they are my best friends. It's hard for you to get me spun up if I don't respect you.
Okay.
So.
That's interesting.
Yeah, I have to care about what you're saying.
Really care.
Yeah.
So when I kicked this podcast off, you and Kevin being such a central component of the impetus behind it, what were your thoughts?
You mean like when I heard Sonobins or?
Yeah, well, the very first one. Like,
yeah,
I just shot this out. And
I was excited. I don't think I realized, what had, got that itch in you to start this. But I was excited. I told you, I was listening to the interview with Sonobin and I'm taking notes. Because that's the insight that I don't get, right? There's a lot of times where I just have to assume stuff and move forward with it. And I was getting so much information that I was just, man, I want to talk about that. I want to talk about that. So it was just spurring a lot of thought,
Talk about that with who?
Anybody. That's what I was saying. I was like, man, I had called Sam and I was like, all right, we got a podcast. There's a lot of good stuff being said. Now we need a forum where we can pick out a topic and we can start going nuts on it.
You arrogant bastard. You immediately said, we got a podcast.
I meant as a community. Because I mean, I look at it as a community thing. Yeah, you're right. I'm an arrogant bastard. But yeah, I was thinking as a community. Like the community got a way for us to nerd out and to pass these thoughts on to each other. You know, and I love it that it's like, you know, half Marine Corps leadership, half having nerd rage, and then half like, you know, well, not half it, but thirds, and then family stuff. And it runs the gamut between those three areas. And it's not just, oh, well, we're nerds and that's all we talk about or, you know, whatever else. I love that, you know, leadership is a fundamental part of the podcast. But yeah, I'm just sitting here thinking like, man, this is all great stuff. And it's great PME. Like, I mean, you've hit a lot of topics, you know, everything from professional development to suicide awareness to family development. And, you know, yeah, I mean, it's hitting on so many levels. And I'm jealous because not that I want a podcast, but I want to get in there and rap with some of these dudes and be like, hey man, let's go grab some beers and just spend a couple hours just, you know, talking about all this stuff. So
there's nothing stopping you from doing that.
No. Other than time.
But we have to make the time.
Yeah.
But I will say that there's a significant amount of time involved with this.
Oh, I can only imagine.
And in order to get it right, and you know, and I talked about it in episode 0, especially after doing Kevin's interview, that it's a heavy burden, but I'm firmly I'm firmly entrenched in the idea that it needs to be done. Mm-hmm. And that in order to do it right, I've got to respectfully engage with the guests in a manner that is going to do justice to their service. I mean, because think about who I'm talking to. If it's a, you know, retired master sergeant or master gunnery sergeant, or, you know, I mean, some of the murderer's row of guys that I've had on, the stakes are high, right? And you know, the last thing I want to do is be the guy to fuck this up, because there is a lot of good in it, from my perspective, and I will say that some of the interactions that I've had with Marines that I don't even know, John, has been surprising. You know, some guys have shared with me that they've listened to Kevin's podcast 5 times over.
Oh, you just did that? His head's going to explode.
Think about that. Some guys have
That is impressive. That is extremely impressive.
They've listened to Sonny's for as often, if not more. And so that says to me that what we're doing here is doing the community a solid.
Absolutely.
But you know, one of the things that was brought up previously in conversation, I think with you and others, is we need to broaden the scope. So how do we do that?
Yeah. So I personally like that it's the community. Personally, and that's not to like impress that upon you or offer that as a solution. That's just something I love about it, is that, and maybe that's because it's my peer group. You know, I don't know. But I like that there's a place that 2600s can stop off at and hear from or relate, and agree or disagree or argue with whoever you're talking to, because I'm sure there's a lot of, Marines that listen to this and like, well, that's bullshit, whatever. But they're still relating, and then it's spurring thought on their end of what they think
with the disagreement.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's awesome. But that's why I like it being the community, because they're doing that. But again, man, I love all of our ranks. So I think there's something worthwhile from all of them. And I was listening to the one with Marino, and you had mentioned, how you had felt about the having mass sergeants and whatever, and I agree with that. Mass sergeants, master gunnies, chief warrant officers in this community who have put in a lot of hard time and over the years, and kind of want to pass on something. I think it's a good opportunity for them to do that. But I also feel like the sergeants also feel like that, that they've worked hard and that they have something to pass as well. Plus, like I said, I use it to make me better at my job. So hearing Sonny say a bunch of stuff and, and recording those thoughts, all right, I need to, and then hearing the Sergeant Marino say stuff and recording those thoughts, it's making me more well-rounded as a listener. So I like to keep it narrowed on the OccFeld, but then I like to keep it open as far as, people talking about what we do. I mean, I'm even interested in hearing, O202s talk about it, or even, O6s that have something to say about how we do business. We were talking earlier about why do we only invite our community to our TNR. I like to hear other people talk about us. Like, what are we doing right? What are we doing wrong? What are their impressions on us? Like, how can we improve? I like to hear that. I want infantrymen to show up at our TNR. I want IO Marines to show up at our TNR. I want Cyber Marines to show up at our TNR and make it better. Hey, you're not doing these things for us. And us having the backbone to listen, and do something about it. So I'm open to that. I just like the centralized topic of us and what we do and how we support the fight. I don't think that gets out a lot, So it's interesting that this is on a public, podcast that anybody can listen to and, kind of get insight into how we do business,
It's kind of daunting too, right?
Yeah, it is, but it's funny because I compliment people on their podcast and they're like, oh yeah, and they shrug it off, and I'm like, no man, seriously, like that was awesome. Because I saw Sonnebind at Joe Farina's retirement. I was like, bro, that was something else. And he was like, you could tell he was being humble, and I'm like, no man, that was really that was awesome. And I told you about Thomason's. I was going out to work out in my garage gym. I was like, I'm not turning this off. I'm sitting there rowing, listening to Thomason's thing. I'm like, man, this is awesome stuff. So I think you're doing a phenomenal job. I like keeping the well-rounded of the different ranks and stuff like that.
What other questions should I be asking?
So I like the whys. Everybody kind of pontificates on Joe Black. I don't know Joe Black. I've had 2 interactions with him, and both of them were he was the monitor. Very positive interactions. But I've heard so many stories. So I want to hear the whys. Like, how did he come to that kind of thought process to become what he was? Because I know when I got up to Headquarters Marine Corps, I was like, I want to be the next Joe Black. I didn't even know the guy. I don't even know him. I talked to him twice on the phone when he's the monitor, and that's it. And but at the same time, he made that impression on the OccFeld where I'm getting orders to Headquarters Marine Corps, and I'm like, I want to be the next Joe Black. I would never achieve that. I don't know if any of us will, but But that's the mark he left. So I want to know why. Like, how did he get to that point? That's what I want to know. Like, how did Kevin Simmons become Kevin Simmons? And I think you're hitting on it to a certain extent. But I just can't get enough of it. I want to know more. So I think that's where what I like to hear more about is the why. Why did you do this? Why did you do that? How did you get here? Where would you go? Like the question you asked, like what would you differently? Where would you go? Those sort of things.
So I guess one of the things that I've kind of circled back to with a lot of the guests is if I could give you 2 hours with Sergeant Scoggins,
mm-hmm.
what would you tell him?
Lead with compassion.
Lead with compassion. Lead
with compassion. I learned that way too late in my Marine Corps career. So I learned it from Master Gunny Hampton. Used to run the SEPME course, Senior to PME course. Phenomenal Marine. Had a huge impact on me, and I was a Master Sergeant already. But that was his thing, right? Like, lead with compassion.
Master Gunny Hampton.
Yeah, and infantry Marine. Man, he was good. It's really easy to fly off the handle at a Marine about something. It's a little bit more difficult to wonder why or how or whatever, like what's affecting that, that Marine or the mission or whatever. And I think leading with compassion is, you got to be firm and fair, but you have to be understanding. And you got to make sure your Marines know that you're understanding and that you're able to lead with compassion. So that's my big thing. I'm huge on that now. And that's how I am with my kids. When something bad happens, it's really easy to fly off the handle and try to correct it. But I sit them down and I try to talk through it, and figure out what happened and whatnot, and then just treat them with compassion. Because, again, it's real easy to just take away everything,
Yeah.
So that's kind of my thing. Is if I could go back to Sergeant Scoggins, horrible leader. If I were to grade myself, thinking back, I've had a very, I look back and remember earlier I was talking about that second lieutenant who was just just really rough to deal with, and then all of a sudden they become a, battalion commander and they're awesome, because I think it's through those trials and tribulations and the learning from failure. I've learned from a lot of failure, and I think that's why I believe in this. Leading with compassion thing is because it's just so much failure, leadership failures throughout my career that I can look back on of how I failed Marines by thinking that I knew what I was doing, and I think I did the right. I thought I was doing the right thing at the right time, but being able to look back and realize how I screwed up and improve myself now. If I could go back to that sergeant, I would say, hey man, slow down a little bit.
So let me ask you this. Have you been able to forgive yourself?
No, not yet. Not yet. I still have a lot that, and probably because I haven't had to face those people. Some of them. And, whenever I meet those Marines that I was probably a little bit worse than I should have been to or whatever.
It's like somebody said.
They laugh about it, or they're like, oh yeah, that Sergeant Scoggins, he was, either I get he was awesome, blah, 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 type thing, or I could tell that they were like, fuck that motherfucker, because I know how it was. So I haven't forgiven myself because I know how I should have been. And I had my dad to look to so that I wouldn't have been that way, because I know how he would have handled it.
Right.
So I have no excuse. And that's probably why I haven't forgiven myself, because I had no excuse.
So in your current billet, you don't have direct subordinates.
No.
But to a great extent, I would argue, we're all your Marines.
I don't think my ego's on that level yet.
Well, but it's. I'm just being objective here.
I look at it as
the occupational field specialist, right? You're advocate and champion for all things 26XX, and by extension, to a certain extent, 17, XX.
I look at the opposite direction. My job is to champion for the OccFeld and what it needs. So I'm the OccFeld Marine, when we were doing the
Our
minors.
volunteerist tribute.
Yeah, and that's exactly how I felt it was, because it was painful. But I would show up to a MARC course and I would brief the class and tell them like, hey, this is what my billet is, blah blah blah. And there was Lance Corporals or whatever, and I'm like, and I would draw the current COA on the board.
Lance Corporals and MARC.
Yeah, and I would let them eat it alive, and they were like, why this, why that, and like I said, I would engage in that argument. Right. And then that would tweak it, and that would tweak it, and that would tweak it. So, so to me, I was always trying to gather from all the Marines in all ranks, and then try to advocate for that. I would go to, you would hear about a lot of perceptions about a certain work role in the Marine Corps, and I would listen to the Marines and I would go and advocate for them. Like, no, you guys, you kind of got it wrong here. So I don't look at it as they're mine. I don't look at it as the OccFeld is mine. I just feel like I'm like you said, the tribute that has to deal with a lot of this stuff. And it's the greatest job that we have the opportunity to fill. I don't know
that billet or just being a Marine.
That billet, being a Marine is that's obvious. But right. That billet, I've never filled another role that's if I could just keep doing this, although I'm pretty worn out now. But holy crap, the impact you can have, it's pretty amazing. If you're doing the right thing, you can have a huge impact, and you can really enable some people. So I like it, when the Master Gunnies came back and were like, hey, we need a DCI Master Gunny. All right, let's make that happen. And then be able to come back and be like, hey guys, you're staffing a DCI Master Gunny this year. Like, that's an opportunity we got now. Another one was a Master Gunny at Intel Department. They were, we need a Master Gunny at Intel Department. For the record, I wholly disagree with that. But it wasn't my choice, right? Like, that's, it's not Scoggins' way. It's what the OccFeld wanted. So like, all right, let's do that. We got it done. So that's the awesome part of it, is you get to see the turnaround of that. When we combine the linguists, we still got to wait a little bit before we reap the rewards, but watching the linguists promotions be on par with the rest of those Marines is phenomenal. And
what was the problem with the previous status quo?
They weren't consistent, and they were slow, and the linguists just weren't given the opportunities to compete. And that was my issue, right? Not everybody deserves a promotion, but everybody deserves the opportunity to compete for promotion, right? Let the best get selected. And that was part of our modernization, is how do we let the best compete and get selected? So trying to get the feeder MOSs for 29 roughly the same size at each rank, right, so that you're getting good competition. That was important to me. And I've listened to linguists since I was a Lance Corporal dealing with their promotions. What's going on with the 31s right now? And I don't think a lot of people understand why the 31s are currently closed and what all that situation. There's some intricacies there. But it's fixed. It's going to be. Not as fast as the Marines want it to be. I understand that they're going through a lot of pain and it fucking right. Sucks. But it's about to click on, and then they're going to be on the same page as everybody else, and we're going to have, and our OccFeld is going to be better for it. So I don't remember what tangent we were going, but you really got me going, because I'm really passionate about this stuff. And one of the other big things for me was slowing down promotions. I know a lot of. I was briefing.
Well, I was getting to the fact that they're all your Marines.
Yeah.
And you're like, I don't see it that way, but you just counted yourself.
Well, I look at it like I'm doing it for them,
You just walked yourself into an armbar.
Yeah, maybe.
It's all right.
You are a tactician. You're jiu-jitsu.
It's that top game. Baby.
Yeah. I've been, how often in your career have you heard officers or other OccFlds say negative things about our staff and COs?
I've heard it once or twice, but I think a lot of it has to do with, from a course control documentation perspective, like that target population description. You think about who we grab, from the pool of manpower available, right, and I did a pool on, just an informal pool on my students over the course of a fiscal year, and for that year, I think they were averaging like around 92 AFQT, averaging. I mean,
I was trying to walk you into something there, but my issue though is that we have great staff and COs. We just don't give them the opportunity to get the experience. So when you look at, like I mentioned at the beginning of the podcast, the enlisted career force controls, staff sergeant is supposed to be around 7 years in the Marine Corps. And we've been
about 6.
Yeah, we've been promoting them around 5, and in some cases, faster. So, and my point of that is, like, I put a lot of stock in experience.
Yeah.
The same for Gunny. Gunny is supposed to be around 13 years. Master Sergeant's supposed to be around 18 years. Master Gun's supposed to be, over 20, about 22 years. Is the goal, right? That's the goal that you're supposed to set for your OccFld and how you're supposed to shape it out. We promote way faster than that. So to me, it's one of the objectives when we were doing the modernization plan was to slow those promotions down so that we gave Marines the opportunity to get the experience at each level so they were ready for that rank. So that we can so that our gunnies had that 13 years of experience so that they were the gunny. Or like you said, your gunny, I think there's some, Marines always overcome. So I think our staff and COs have overcome and done the job, but have we traditionally set them up for success? I didn't think so. We hadn't been offering training for them at the right time. The promotions were way too fast. We were putting them in really bad situations and they were just overcoming. So my goal was like, all right, let's make the situation better for them. Let's try to get them where our sergeants have a shit ton of experience, because I hate hearing people say, oh, sergeants should be team leaders. Hell yeah, they should. But
why not?
Why shouldn't they?
Why should a sergeant not be a team leader? Is he too senior?
Well, no. I think a lot of people are thinking too junior.
What?
I think, yeah. I've gotten a lot of arguments about that, because a lot of people were like, oh, staff sergeants should be team leaders, but they weren't wrong, and the reason was being when we did the 202K plus up, the staff sergeants were at the experience level of our old sergeants because we started promoting staff sergeants so fast. So they weren't wrong. It was just we started promoting too fast. So we got to slow that down. Yeah, a lot of Marines out there are like, man, Scoggins had to slow down promotions. I'm a sergeant. Fuck him.
So I guess I was lucky in that I picked up a team as a sergeant, and I really didn't have a solid grasp on all things SIGINT, but because of just a forceful personality,
you overcame.
Staff and COs said, that's the Marine we're going to put in charge of this team. The other guys can SIGINT, but this guy can be in charge. And I think around that time, at least at 2nd Radio Battalion, individuals that they could confidently point to and say, this guy can lead this team away from the flagpole, connect with the grunts and execute actions on the objective as required.
Yeah.
Those guys were few and far between. And if you could execute that, if you could do that, then that's how you got a team.
Yeah.
And I picked up the SIGINT from my lance corporals and my corporals.
Yep.
But, it also required a certain amount of humility. But one of the things that I took away from that time at Radio Battalion was that, and I got it from the First Sergeant Tripp, as I understand it, was a former radio recon guy. But his point to me was that, because he gave me about a 2.5 hour fit rep class.
Wow. You don't get those often.
No.
They're needed.
But and I've kind of refined my approach to teaching the PES. Because it's not just a fit rep. I go even further into the master brief sheet and explaining the values and how they change over time, and even the little tool at the bottom of it that corresponds to the comparative analysis and whatnot. But you can't be all things all the time. There are going to be some areas where you're going to have to distinguish yourself, even from yourself, right? And by that I mean you can pursue excellence to move closer to that far right side of the fitness report. But if you had the opportunity, which of those areas would you choose to kind of specialize in? And those are some of the questions that I ask the young sergeants when they're starting to figure out what a fit rep means to their selection, retention, opportunities, and also identification for special programs, right? Because all that comes into play.
Yep.
So let me ask John Scoggins, what are the areas in which of the fitness report that you've tried to distinguish yourself, even when it's just competing with yourself, right? Like know yourself, seek self-improvement. These are the areas that I would really like to work on.
Yeah, it was really billet-based for me. Because right now, one of the things that I really have to, deal with is, my communication skills. That's a big, big thing for me, because if I have horrible communication skills, there's implications for that. So that's kind of the one of the things for this current billet is that. Man, you ask some difficult questions, man. Now I'm trying to recall all the different areas of the fit rep and then what billets have I filled out and where they are, Yeah, man, that's a hard one. Because I really just execute, to be honest. There's a lot of things that I regret not doing. Not regret. I learned that I should have been doing. And I try to, advise other Marines to do the same, which is talking to my RS and asking them what they needed. I think too many of us go through this career thinking that we're in it for ourselves, but we're not. I mean, we have an RS. We're supposed to be doing what our RS needs us to do. So that should have been the question is, like, what areas do you need me to be, stronger at? One is so that depending on your relationship with your RS is, how do you make your RS more successful? Because they may be weak in certain areas and they need you to be better in those areas. So how do you complement them? And that's more of a staff and CO thing when you're working directly for another officer. How do you complement each other? So that's something that I should have done more often is communicate with my boss. How do I support you? I think we get pretty ahead of ourselves, especially staff and COs, thinking, we run this show. No, you don't, brother. Like,
so it kind of reminds me of Sonny's response to the question I asked him, what do you suck at?
Yeah.
Right. So, I asked you, where do you try to excel?
Yeah.
And kind of came up short on that.
Yeah, I did. I just try to compliment the people around me. I'm very adaptable like that. I change with where I'm at and who I'm working with and who I'm working for and what the mission is. So that's just kind of the way I am. I try to, act differently or do different things depending on what the mission is or where I'm at. And, right now you're talking about how, I don't necessarily have a lot of Marines working for me. So, leadership isn't technically one of those things that I'm honing in on every day.
See, that's where I disagree with you, brother.
I know.
I think you're leading the community.
Sure, but I'm doing it by focusing on a lot of those other traits, technical proficiency and communication skills and stuff like that in order to do that, right? So,
so when you sit down with your RS to do your counselings,
mm-hmm.
do you do that?
Right now? Yes. Chief Officer Bush does counsel.
Yeah. Often and aggressively.
Yes. We sit right next to each other. It's a daily counsel.
Right. So what are some of the things that you go on? And the reason why I'm asking this question is because,
mm-hmm.
You're talking about a mass sergeant that's getting ready to retire is going to have a conversation with a CW05. They're in 2 key billets within the Pentagon. What does their conversation sound like when they're going over this Marine's fitness report, and how and what does that young sergeant listening to this need to extrapolate from that right answer and inject it into his conversation with his second lieutenant?
Yeah. So I'll tell you, the conversation isn't much different. Because, well, maybe a little bit different. I don't know if a second lieutenant has the visibility on that sergeant that Chief Officer Bush has on me.
Right.
Because not only our desks...
He's probably a lot taller.
Yeah. Our desks are side by side, and a lot of times we're at the same meetings, and he sees my interaction immediately. Like, he's seen me brief generals. He's seen me brief lance corporals. He's seen my interaction with both, so he can make that comparison. Does this guy treat a lance corporal the same way he treats a general?
So I would say that your communication skills are probably exactly where they need to be. I
try. Like I said, I fly off the handle sometimes a little too soon, and sometimes the wrong company.
Right.
I have had a couple counselings from my current boss about. Maybe taking a little bit too much liberty with the mass sergeant thing and the retirement thing, because I know I can get away with a little bit more, and I'll be a little bit less tactful than I probably should be. And so I've gotten a couple, negative counselings, not from Chief Officer Mush, but from Lieutenant Colonel Hoey, put the plug, one of the best officers I've ever worked with, and he's about to take command. But he's come over and said, "Hey, did you really put that in that email?" And I'm thinking, "Yeah, sir. Did you read that? That was awesome." He's like, "No, John, no, bro. That's not right." And I'm like, "Okay." And I have to go back and reevaluate. Am I getting a little too jumpy in my seat? Thinking that I'm, a little bit more invincible than I am, and then correct myself. So yeah, there's been points where my communication skills have lacked. But that's also parts where that kind of response has also earned me credibility as well, because I've been the one who's told senior leaders exactly what they needed to hear. We talked about that earlier.
Right. But it's kind of like a balancing act, right? I mean,
yeah.
And knowing when to when to be brutally honest.
Know what the fuck you're talking about.
Okay.
Right? There's just too many people who come off extremely confident, and then they don't know what the fuck they're talking about. And Sam will tell you, I have very little.
Sam Carter.
Yeah, he will tell you I have very little patience for people who don't know what the hell they're talking about. And so if I'm in a meeting with you, and you start influencing other people, and I'm sitting there and I'm the expert on it, and you start influencing me, I will not waste a second to let everyone in the room know that you do not know what you're talking about. And if they have any questions about that, ask the right person. And I will name the right people for them to, because we don't have time for that in the Marine Corps, right? We got to get stuff done, and we don't have time for BS like that going around. And so I have very little tact when that's happening, and so he'll tell you I've done it to a lot of the ranks. I'll shut it down immediately, but I think back to a couple of those situations. They were pretty funny. But yeah. So those, it's worked in for and against me. But I think people just need to know what they can get away with, right? You have to earn that credibility, and then you could probably be a little bit freer with what you say and how you say it. But if you haven't earned that credibility yet, maybe you just need to sit in the back and listen.
And there's nothing wrong with that, right?
No, absolutely not. No, but you don't want to be that young staff NCO that shows up to the TNR conference thinking they know everything, and then you start spouting off like you do, and then you find out in a very uncomfortable way that maybe you should just had your ears open for that little while longer, So
I like to take those opportunities at those venues to actively learn, right?
Yeah.
And seek further information and different perspectives, and because some of these guys are in key billets where their placement and access to that information is unique, not only in the OccField but across the Marine Corps, and so, this is a perfect venue in order to gain that insight.
Oh yeah, I want them there. I just don't want them to slow down the progress of that conference by injecting their inexperience or their lack of knowledge. I want them to ask the questions. I want them to pull me aside that night, like, "Hey, what is this all about?" Blah blah. All right, let's go over that. Or, you got a CW05 in the room, like, pick his brain. He's got 30 years of experience, or, any one of the people that show up to any of these numbers of, working groups meetings, or even in your own battalion, go walk into your ops chief's office. A lot of these guys don't realize that they could probably get away with that. We all love being leaders. A staff sergeant walking into the Master Guns office saying, like, "Hey, I'd love to pick your brain." The Master Guns isn't going to tell you to go away. He might say come back a little bit later or whatever, but you're going to rejuvenate that guy. He's going to love sitting down with you and helping you out with this stuff. But, we have the tendency in our OccField to, we're pretty fucking good, and we eat our own. And so, we show up full of piss and vinegar to a meeting, and we start spouting off, and then we realize real quick, like, no, maybe I was wrong. So, but I don't really get mad at junior Marines for that. I get mad when senior people do that stuff. And my wife gets on me sometimes because she's like, "Well, you just think you know it all," and I'm like, "I just don't talk about shit I don't know." Like, I don't speak with confidence about something I don't know. I'm going to sit there quietly and listen. And then if I know something, I'm gonna be very aggressive with it.
Then you'll hear my voice.
Yep.
Truth to power.
Yep.
So, retirement. What's in the works?
So I'm going to stay in that area. Looking around at opportunities, there's a lot of growth, obviously, cyber. It's getting a lot of growth, civilian growth and all that. DCI stood up their civilian positions there. I've been thinking, I'm like, man, part of me thinks I either need to get away from the Marine Corps or I need to get away from the community because I'm so passionate that I don't know if I could keep my mouth shut. So one of those I think has to switch. If I stay with a Marine Corps organization, I think it needs to be away from our community, so that I'm into something new and I'm forced to sit there and listen and learn before I start spouting off of the mouth about stuff. Or the reverse. If I stay in this skill or this craft, then I probably need to go work for either another civilian organization or another service, so that's what keeps me at bay. Because I'm passionate and I made a lot of changes in the last couple of years, and I want it to evolve, and I don't want to be the guy that sticks around and keeps trying to protect what he had. We talked for a while about my billet, about whether or not you have somebody who shakes stuff up, and then you have somebody come in who just sustains, and you just have this cycle of people that do it that way, just so that things don't just continuously be in, pulling the OccField in different ways. But when we finally got towards doing the slating, I was like, no, that ain't right. The reason why we had to shake things up so much on this modernization plan and the standardization and moving our 91 billets around was because, all that, we haven't done all that work. We haven't been evolving over time. So we had to do a big course shift. So the worst thing for me was picking somebody to go in the billet who wasn't going to evolve the OccField. So I was like, no, we need somebody who's going to keep shaking this shit up, who's not afraid to, keep working what we need to get done. So that's another reason why I don't want to be around, because I don't want to keep us in, with what, hey, we did this because of these reasons and don't change it. Well, the situation's changed. Sorry, Scoggins, but your plan didn't last. Yeah, touche. I don't want it to. I want it to change. I want my plan to change. But, my plan, our plan.
Right. Well, yeah.
I say mine because I got to execute it, and it was fun. But
any regrets?
Within the Marine Corps or within my job?
Within the Marine Corps.
Oh, man, this was one hell of a ride, bro. This is the best ever. Could you think about it, man? This is awesome. People you meet, the stuff you've done. I still remember the first time I rode in a Humvee in Hawaii when I got the first Ray battalion. We were in RRP, and I was going to be security for the drop zone or something. Some boot lance corporal. And I was just sitting in the Humvee giddy as shit. I'm riding a Humvee, and my civilian friends are still in my hometown. Or they're going to whatever school, but I'm in a freaking Humvee. And I've never lost that throughout my career. I get in a I'm in a C-130. This is freaking cool. So go to a different country.
Those reminders of why you joined.
Yeah, man. I mean, we forget that. It's just awesome. The stuff we got to do, the stuff we get to see. No matter what our careers are, what our experiences have been, and how they differ, just our individual paths. And that's probably why this podcast is so cool, because you're listening to all these Marines and their individual experience, and you're like, man, that is so awesome. You got to do some cool stuff, So, no, I don't. Overall, no regrets. I do wish that I could have done things a little bit differently to firm some things up. I wish I had been a better sergeant. And a better gunny, because those were the two great ranks. But man, it's phenomenal. Man, remember being a gunny, bro? Yeah.
I was honest in answering a question to Scranton. He said, you're close to Master Sergeant. I was like, man, I'm loving life as a gunny. At a letter company out there in Texas, fucking swinging for the fences.
Yeah.
Stay the fuck out of my way. I got work to do.
Bro.
And creating space for, all of my subordinates to really kind of get in and grind their teeth as they just,
Yep. How awesome was that? I think back to that stuff now, and I joke with people when they ask me why I'm retiring. I tell them because I'm not good with breakups. If the Marine Corps had to break up with me first, I'd be just destroyed, So I had to break up with the Marine Corps. So I just didn't want the Marine Corps to break up with me.
So here's a bit that was communicated to the force by the commandant. Every Marine has a story. Find ways to interact and talk with each other. Identify and address one another's personal challenges. Build and strengthen the bonds of camaraderie we share as Marines. Mm-hmm. Resolve to spend more time socializing with each other. Share your stories, grow with each other, and build friendships that will last a lifetime. And John, I want to thank you for sharing your story with us, brother.
Yeah, man. Thank you. It's a hell of a platform.
And with that, we're out.